Welcome to the Sixth Wheels Consulting Podcast, dialoguing disability and discussing difference, inclusion, and all abilities in today's world. Now here are your hosts, Matthew Shapiro and Bob Nolly.
Hey there, everyone. Spring has sprung. At least it feels like it. How are you? You found your way back, and that's the important thing. Welcome to the Six Wheels Consulting Disability Podcast. I'm Dr. Bob Nolly. How are you? Good. I'm glad to hear it. Got a chair for you. Come on over here. Have a seat. Comfy? And here's my good buddy, your host, Matthew Shapiro. Matthew, how are you?
Bob, how are you, sir? I always come prepared with the comfy chairs, dude.
Yeah, you have the best chair. I'm sitting on this little three-legged stool here.
I do.
I feel like I should be milking a cow. I don't know what to say. Hey, you, I know you're a big football fan, and we, had some fun through football season. Are you a basketball fan as well, or not so much?
Oh, I love March Madness. I'm hoping.
Okay, well, here it comes. Yeah, we're supposed to be evergreen here, so nobody knows what time it is. But yeah, it's that time of year.
It's that wonderful basketball time of year.
Yeah, and I tell you, here in the studio TV is not on, so I'm maintaining full focus because we have company. We have company.
Yes,
we have company. We have a wonderful lady from Roanoke, Virginia. We call ourselves the RVA. I think they're the RNK or something like that. But she's from the Roanoke area, and she is now a housing counselor at Total Action for Progress, TAP. She went to school at ODU. I hope that's right, and it is right. How about that? And has some deep roots in making the world a better place. Everybody, please welcome to the program, Ashton Fallon. Ashton, how are you?
Hey, everyone. I am doing awesome. How are you guys doing?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. You got a better seat than me. I've got this three-legged stool. You're in a nice chair. That's good.
Well, I'm actually sitting on my couch.
The couch and sweats approach. She's probably watching basketball.
Nice and comfy. There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, my gosh.
That's it. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so, Matthew, how did you guys bump into each other?
Yeah, so Ashton and I go way back, actually, and many of our listeners have heard me reference on a number of episodes the Sorensen Institute, and I was fortunate enough to do 2 of the 4 programs that the Sorensen Institute offers. As everyone knows, I'm very much a political nerd, so anytime I can get involved in politics and stuff, I try to do that. So when I did my second Sorensen Institute program, the Emerging Leaders program, Ashton was part of my class. We spent I think like 6 or 8 weekends during the year that we were in the class in different places in the Commonwealth, and just hit it off and have stayed close since. And she had reached out to me and was interested in being on our wonderful show, and that's what brought us here tonight.
Oh, great. You're so glad you found us. Thanks for coming. So you guys, I'll ask Ashton first. We've mentioned this institute a couple of times. Tell us a little bit more about who it's for and what gets done, the Sorensen Institute.
So the program that Matthew and I did, like you said, it was the Emerging Leaders program. The Sorensen Institute is designed for people who either want to run for political office, who are working for the government, or people who are working for like an NGO or a nonprofit organization. And for me, the time when I did the Sorensen Institute, I was working for a wastewater advocacy nonprofit organization called CERCAP, where the organization did a lot of just advocacy for mostly people in rural areas who didn't have access to water. So that's where I kind of got my first experience with that line of work. And then now I work for another nonprofit organization, which you mentioned, Total Action for Progress, which is really huge. I think we're the second largest community action agency in the state. And so, of course, there's advocacy. And, we're, of course, as the nonprofit, we're constantly intersecting with the government in so many different ways. And so that's kind of, I guess, to answer your question, why I did Sorensen. And as from a nonprofit perspective, I really want to be an effective leader and make a difference in my community. And so I love the program, and I'm sure Matthew would agree. It's it was just an overall great experience. Sorry, that was a long answer.
That's great. That's a great answer. Thanks for filling in the blank there for folks that may not be aware of that program.
I didn't have to do any lifting. It's all right. It's perfect.
See, that's very good. See, so in this digital age where so many people do have their heads in their phone, and we network through LinkedIn and other social media and the like, to get together with a group like that, particularly folks that have a common goal, that's got to be a high value network you develop there with the people you meet.
Yeah, I'll go first, and then Ashton jump in. Like the people that I met at my two Sorensen Institute programs, like they're people I still stay in contact with. And follow on Facebook. And for me, I see a lot of them regularly down at the General Assembly when I'm down at the General Assembly doing my work. And so, yeah, it's a nice little group of people that, you can talk politics with and not be shooed away, because as we all, even though I don't necessarily agree with this philosophy, politics is one of those topics that you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table. But like I said, I think that's a bunch of malarkey. And so, it's good to have like-minded folks we can debate the issues and still all be friends and agree to disagree in many different scenarios. Ashton, I don't know if you agree or have another perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with what Matthew was saying. Like Matthew, I'm also really passionate about politics, but I feel like we're kind of in an age where it's so divisive, or people get very hostile or upset. And, I love Sorensen because it kind of sets the tone that, like, regardless of your viewpoint, like, we are all in this together. Their whole motto is like working across the aisle. So, they really strive for us all to appreciate differing viewpoints and really challenge our perspectives. And so I think because that's kind of the tone that they set in all their programs, I mean, everyone, I feel like, gets along very well. Everyone is very respectful. And even if, let's say, you're a Democrat and you're running for office, if someone is a Sorensen alum who's a Republican, they a lot of times will support that person, whether contributing to their campaign. I've heard that happen many times just because it's like the Sorensen way.
Yeah, it's definitely a great like connector. So like when you see a fellow person that has, when you graduate one of the Sorensen programs, you get a pin, and oftentimes you'll see fellow Sorensen grads wearing their lapel pin, and you automatically know, like, okay, I understand this person. They understand like the sort of the quote unquote right way to go about handling politics. And there's a shared experience and a shared understanding, which is really, really cool.
That's great. That's great. Matthew, I'm going to let you, talk a little bit more to Ashley here in a second, but I just wanted to ask her about some volunteer work that I'm aware of she did for a group called Villages of Africa.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're still involved there, Ashton, but can you tell us a little bit about your efforts there?
Sure. Well, Villages of Africa actually did close, sadly, the store, but the mission behind it, Villages of Africa was a store located in downtown Roanoke, and it started as kind of like an effort between two local churches. One of the churches was the church that I've attended since I was a baby, and every year our churches take several trips to Ghana, and we actually have a hospital up there that provides healthcare and different services to people in this rural village, in addition to some other great programs. And so the store was kind of an extension of that to help raise money for those projects. And my mom was actually the store manager, so many weekends you would see me there volunteering or just doing something to help her out. But I've personally, I feel like I've kind of grown up in sort of the nonprofit volunteerism like mentality, like give back to your community. And so maybe perhaps that's why I've ended up in a nonprofit, why my sister is now in grad school at Clemson, and she's looking to, do a job where she's going to be giving back. So I feel like we've sort of been raised to be that way. And
it all runs in the family.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to raise my son to be that way. And so when we see like a homeless person, for example, I'll be like, here, why don't you give them a hug and give them like $1? And like, I remember one time my boyfriend and myself and my son were walking downtown, and I was like, hey, do you have any change? And I literally didn't have any cash. And I was like, sorry, sir, I really don't have any money. And my son pulled out the $1 that he had, and he was like, here, you can have it. This is the only dollar.
Oh my.
And he gave them a hug, and they were just like so touched that a little 7-year-old gave them, like, you know, even though it was $1, they were just like, wow.
That's so adorable.
I know. Sorry, I had to share that story.
Oh, that's just great. Oh, that's just great. Okay, Matthew, it's off to you. Got questions?
No, you're doing fine. So
yeah, of course, I'm the pro here. I'm setting you up. Yeah,
you're doing great. You're doing great. So we always have a theme, Ashton, for kind of every episode.
Mm-hmm.
And you had reached out to me, you know, a couple weeks ago on Facebook, and was like, you know, I really want to talk about my experience as a parent of you'd mentioned your son, and I remember you and I having a lot of conversations about how he has, you know, some different learning challenges and different disabilities, and so you know, I thought that would be a really, really cool episode, because I know that I have like my mom's perspective of you know, raising me as a not so much longer a youngster with a disability, but I think it's always also really important to have other perspectives. And so to kind of get us going here, can you tell us a little bit more about your son and like what's the background there?
Absolutely. So, you know, my son, he was born like on time. As a child, you know, he was very high energy, which doesn't really surprise me because I'm sure Matthew can. I have a lot of energy.
Yeah, I was going to say you're very high energy yourself.
So, I mean, I guess in that regard, I'm not surprised, you know, because my mom used to call me the little Energizer bunny when I was a kid. So He's always had a lot of energy. But I even noticed at like a young age, he definitely struggled in some ways, I would say, with like his emotional regulation, like his tantrums. Like I know that, you know, I think it's like ages 2 up to like 4 or 5-ish kids. It's normal for kids to have tantrums. But I noticed that his tantrums would be a lot longer, or, you know, and I was just like, oh, well, he's just, you know, being a toddler or whatever. This is just part of development.
Right.
And, you know, when he hit kindergarten, that's kind of when I would say it was more apparent that he was really struggling. You know, when he started kindergarten, he started doing well initially. And then, you know, I started getting calls from the school, like, you know, Hayden had a meltdown today, or Hayden did this today. And I was just like, I am so confused. I don't really know what's going on. Like, you know, he did really well in daycare. And so I eventually just decided to take him to see a psychiatrist. And then shortly after that, he was diagnosed with ADHD.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for you know, your willingness and you know, being comfortable with Bob and I to share that, because I know that is something that a lot of families go through, and so I hope that there are listeners out there who hear this episode and can draw on, you know, your experience for dealing with their own son or daughter, which I think is really important to give back. And so talk about what has it been like, kind of, you know, learning about your son and or learning about how sort of society perceives your son, and sort of navigating that world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I feel like when I look at special needs, and, you know, special needs is such a wide array of people. You know, there's people with mental illness, there's people with developmental delays, you know, there's all different types of people in the special needs community. Sure. And for my son, you know, it's not necessarily as quote unquote apparent, just because he's not necessarily like developmentally delayed.
Sure.
But for him, with children who have ADHD, and there's different variations of ADHD, just like, you know, with autism, there's children who have more severe autism versus children who are very high functioning. I know that every time my son has been tested, he's in like the 90th percentile, very severely ADHD. And so, you know, unfortunately that his struggles became most apparent when he was in school. And, you know, my frustration was I felt like a lot of the teachers who were dealing with him either didn't have the patience or just were really uneducated in how to teach a child with ADHD.
Sure.
You know, and of course, as a parent, and I'm also a single parent, you know, you're just kind of like learning on the fly. Like there's no manual on how to parent a child, period. And then like you add ADHD on there. And so I initially, to be totally transparent, I was very frustrated with the public school system just because, you know, what ended up happening to my son was I was getting phone calls probably 30 and 40 times that year to come get him, where he missed out on educational time. And I thought that I was completely alone. I thought that I was the only person going through this until I started meeting other parents, and they were saying the same thing. And, you know, Virginia, I will say, is notorious for like the prison pipeline to prison, whatever, you know, you hear about that a lot. School to prison. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
School to prison pipeline.
And I totally didn't really get that until I experienced that firsthand with my own son, when I felt like the school was just like, we don't want to deal with him. He's very disruptive. You know, he destroyed a classroom today. Just come get him. And so this went on like over and over. And so I finally pushed the school to get what's called a 504, which is basically a plan. It's a contract, if you will, between yourself and the school. It's not a legal contract per se. I feel like 504s, there's no legal repercussions. If the school doesn't follow the 504, there's not really that much you can do as a parent. And so, and I don't know if you disagree with that, Matthew. If you do, you can totally tell me.
I'm riveted by this, and you know, our listeners, I hope will remember that we touched a little bit on 504 plans and IEPs, but they're a learning tool that helps to level the playing field for individuals with all different types of disabilities, whether it's somebody like your son or somebody like me, because when I was going through the K-12 system, I was an IEP student. And I can tell you the whole story you're outlining of about like frustration with school systems, like you're not alone. And oftentimes there is a challenge that a lot of school systems have around like teaching everyone, right? And so, you know, that is why I think it's so important to figure out what is the best learning style for your son or for me or for someone else that has a disability, and work through that, rather than kind of doing what you just described, which was, here, Hayden can't learn, let me just call his mom and have her come get him. Right. So that's not an uncommon story that you just described.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it can be very discouraging, especially if you're not wealthy or you can't afford the school. You know, I know that on the extreme end, you can get an attorney involved if you feel like your child is being denied, you know, the proper, or as they say, I'm sure you've heard the free and appropriate public education.
Yes.
If you feel like they're being denied that. But again, you know, I'm a single parent, so there's no way that I could afford the amount of hours that it would require for an attorney to even fight this. And, you know, it got to the point where my son was, I think, getting suspended sometimes like almost like 3 and 4 days at a time, you know, and I was like, no, this is related to disability. And, you know, it was like I felt really no help, very little. And so it got to the point where I connected with another mom in the community whose son had autism, and autism and ADHD are very similar in some ways. Sure. And so when I talked with her, she very much understood me, and she was kind of like my light. Like, she was the first person that I felt like really understood what I was going through. And she connected me with an advocate. And once I met an advocate and I told her what was going on, she was like, no. Like, we are going to fight this, because I tried to get an IEP and he was denied, which, you know, based on his case, he should have, you know, they should have approached me to give him an IEP.
I was going to say, like, what was he denied? What was he denied based on?
Well, they said because he had started a new medication when they started the IEP process, he had been improving. And then as soon as the testing wrapped up, he started struggling again. And they were like, well, because of these results, feel like he can't get an IEP, you know, and his psychiatrist kept pushing for the school to get him a one-on-one aid, just because a lot of times if you listen about ADHD, a lot of times with ADHD, there are what can be called coexisting conditions, whether that be sensory issues or a mood disorder, or there's so many different things that can happen. And my son, unfortunately, he developed, I don't know exactly how this happened, but over time he developed what's called ODD, or oppositional defiance disorder.
You were talking a little bit about how you had thought that you wanted to get Hayden, an IEP, but that your educational team didn't know, he was basically denied that IEP. So like, why do you think that was, and what brought that about?
So we had started the testing process for the IEP, and at the time when we started the testing, he had just started a new medication. However, unfortunately, with medications, the issue with that is that kids' bodies can become used to the medication, and over time it becomes less effective. Started the IEP testing, the medication, he had just started it. It was working at the time. And so he wasn't having as many outbursts or tantrums or things like that going on in the classroom. His behavior was improving. And so the IEP team concluded that even though he had struggled significantly prior to that 1 month or 2 months of testing, that he was not eligible.
Sure.
And so, as soon as they ended, our IEP team evaluation, the problem started right back up again.
Sure.
He was getting suspended multiple days. And so it got to the point where I eventually just stopped working, and I took, I think, 8 months off from working just so I could tend to him because with an IEP, that can take months of negotiating. It's not just like, here you go, here's the document. Like, no, you have, it's a negotiation process. And
so you actually had to stop working for 6 to 8 months.
I think it was 8 months.
Yep. And so but you ran into an advocate. You found somebody in an advocacy group that helped you out.
Yeah.
Yes. I connected with an advocate, and she was so helpful. She had, I think, 2 of her kiddos had severe disabilities. And so she completely understood where I was coming from. I remember what was kind of the tipping point was I had wanted to meet her for coffee, as well as one of the special needs moms that I'm friends with in the community. And we were literally sitting there. I put my phone down for 10 minutes and I checked my phone, and Hayden's teacher was texting me saying, "You need to come get him right now. We're calling the police. We're going to escort him to the hospital." And I was like, oh no.
What a great phone call to get. Jeez.
What?
And so, that to me, I was like, I literally put my phone down for 10 minutes. And I've heard stories of kids with autism in our school system being handcuffed. And I was just like, that can be very traumatic for a child when they're already having an outburst, and then you're going to handcuff them. Like, because again, they're not trained. I felt like the school was very ill prepared in how to handle him. And so that I told my advocate that, and so she was like, "This is crazy. Like, we're going to email the special education department today."
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of when the ball got rolling. And as soon as I had an advocate get involved, my picture completely changed. It's like, once the school knows that you're getting legal representation, like, they take you a lot more seriously. And it's unfortunate because a lot of families, they don't know their rights. They don't understand the law. They don't understand that they can challenge the school. And so knowledge really is power. And if you really don't know that, you could just be just doing whatever the school says. You're like, they're educators, they know what's best for my child. Right. No, that's not correct. The school is doing what's in the best interest for them, not necessarily for your child.
Sure.
Hey folks, we're going to take a break here. Thanks very much to Ashton Fallon for joining us today. We're going to come back and finish up this conversation with her in our next episode, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. For your host, Matthew Shapiro, this is Bob Nolly. Think inclusion, keep rolling forward. See you next time, everyone.